Do you want to learn more on how to put money to work in regenerative food and agriculture? Follow our video course via investinginregenerativeagriculture.com/course or in the links below. Now, on to the podcast. You're going to listen to an interview with Rhamis Kent, a permaculture expert who has taught courses all around the world. He's on a mission to show the traditional finance world that it is possible to restore large ecosystems and create meaningful returns for society, the planet, and financially. We talked about the differences between a true investor and a gambler, or someone who is just speculating, and his involvement in the ecosystem restoration camps, who started this year in Spain but are already expanding. Enjoy! Welcome to another episode of Investing in Regenerative Agriculture, Investing as if the planet mattered. Podcast show where I talk to the pioneers in the regenerative food and agriculture space to learn more on how to put our money to work to regenerate soil, people, local communities and ecosystems while making an appropriate and fair return. Why my focus on soil and regeneration? Because so many of the pressing issues we face today have their roots in how we treat our land, grow our food and what we eat. And it's time that we as investors, big and small, and consumers start paying much more attention to the dirt/soil underneath our feet. Before we get started, I've been recording these interviews next to my day job, and I will definitely continue to do so and release about an episode a month. But at the same time, I would love to take this further, share more interviews. There are many more stories to share on investing in regenerative food and agriculture. More depth, improve the quality, maybe even doing some video series. So I started a Patreon community, which makes it easy to support creators like myself. If these podcasts have been of value to you, and if you have the means, I invite you to support me and make this happen. For more information, please find the link to my Patreon account in the description below. And now, without further ado, the interview. Enjoy! Welcome to Investing in Regenerative Agriculture, Investing as if the planet mattered. I'm Koen van Seijen, your host, and in the podcast of today, I'm joined by Rhamis Kent. Rhamis is a permaculture consultant who has taught courses everywhere, including Jordan, Palestine, occupied West Bank, Greece, Ethiopia, Yemen, and Turkey, and this is only a short list. Rhamis is also a board member of the Ecosystem Restoration Camps Foundation, which we're going to cover later. Welcome, Rhamis.
Thank you, Koen.
So to start with a personal question, how do you end up on the land in permaculture, in regenerative agriculture? How did you get there?
That's a long story, but I'll try to give you
the short version. Yeah.
My formal background is actually in mechanical engineering. So this seems to be, I think at first glance, a bit incongruous. But I had worked for a number of years in research and development work, mostly with medical devices. I did a year of aerospace engineering in the Bay Area, and also in New England. Actually, one of my former employers is the gentleman who invented the Segway, Dean Kamen. It was my first job out of college.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, but I
not very useful on the farm, I think, are they? No, there's an off-terrain version.
There is an off-road version.
Yeah, I've seen that. I haven't ridden it. I would like to, but I did the normal version. But
yeah. But there's I just got to a point where I just got tired of working in an office, and it wasn't necessarily what I saw myself doing. I think there are definitely aspects of engineering work that appealed to me, but there was just something else I felt like I needed to be doing. So, I taught a couple of years of high school in Oakland, California. I worked for about 6 months on a tugboat on San Francisco Bay, which was interesting. I always joke that if I knew about that 20 years earlier, maybe I might still be working on a tugboat. But I eventually, during the course of my teaching, I was asked to be an administrator for an Arabic language course being held at the campus of UC Berkeley. And one of the students in the course, interestingly enough, used to work for Jeff Lawton, who is the managing director of the Permaculture Research Institute. She worked for him for about 3 years, and it was through her that I became introduced to permaculture. I didn't even know what it was. She asked me, do you know what permaculture is? I said, no. So then she showed me the Greening the Desert video, which at the time had just been released, I believe, or at least it hadn't been out for long. And I said, at the moment I saw it, I said, I have to do this. And Jeff happened to be coming to the Bay Area probably about a week after she had shown me that video, and I went to go meet him with a group of people, and I came to find out that he knew some old friends of mine, and there are a couple of other, coincidental things that really confirmed for me that I needed to go and spend some time with him. So eventually, I went down to Australia to his farm, Zaytuna farm, to take a number of classes with him and to do an internship. And then also during that time, I was able to participate in a couple of consultancies, which my engineering background had helped in that regard in doing the things necessary to perform some of those tasks associated with consultancy. And by the time it was, by the time I was heading back to the States, I told him, I want to work, I want to work with you, whatever you're doing, I want to help out. And, since then, I've become a co-director at the Permaculture Research Institute, and, part of the consulting team that Jeff's put together called Permaculture Sustainable Consulting Proprietary Limited. And, and I've since, become involved with a number of other efforts, including the Ecosystem Restoration Camps Foundation, the World Permaculture Association, which was started by one of my students in Italy, Giuseppe Tallarico. Also, another student from that region, Ignazio Schettini. He went on to start the Mediper Lab, or Permacultura Mediterranea, which is also based in Italy. There are a number of efforts which have come out of the work that I've been able to do over the last several years, and it's easily one of the best decisions I ever made was getting involved with this, because there's so much to be done, and you really feel like you're doing work that matters. Yeah.
You could have still been on a tugboat, which is also work that needs to be done, but this is probably for all of us was a better choice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely for me. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I can imagine also for humanity as a whole. But I would like to frame this discussion around. The series is called "Investing in Regenerative Agriculture." We've had a bit of a pre-discussion on a number of things, and I would love to dive deeper into that. What you see, you've worked with the financial world. You're in a lot of conversations with the financial investment industry, etc. And you're working on the ground, and I think it's a very interesting perspective to look at both sides and see what's necessary. And I would love to start, and then we also will cover, of course, the camps, the ecosystem restoration camps you mentioned before as a nice example of what's possible and putting that to work. But I think I would like to start with a focused question. We've discussed it before. What is an investor to you? And if a group of investors is listening to this podcast, who should be considered investor? Who should they consider themselves as investor or not? Or what for you does the word investor in this modern world and in the agricultural world of the future mean?
Well, this is a very complex question, a very complex issue, very multifaceted. And this is something that I first started looking at several years ago. I had the good fortune of becoming involved with a group called TBLI, Triple Bottom Line Investment or Investors. Was headed up
Robert Rubenstein.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay. Robert. Okay. Yeah. So several years ago, I was introduced to Robert, and this interestingly enough came from a connection with the Masdar City project in Abu Dhabi. And during the time that I'd spent in Australia, Jeff had received a call from a large consulting entity that was competing for a part of the one of the contracts connected to the development of that project. And I had helped in getting some material together that eventually won the contract for the company that had called on Jeff to lend some help in putting together some ideas. And what had occurred to me then was, the people that won the contract, that this is not the type of design work that they are accustomed to doing. This is not an area of expertise for them. And essentially the way they won the contract was they took the information that was given to them and they kind of dressed it up in a nice front end package.
Nice PowerPoint.
Right, nice PowerPoint, renderings, all the rest of it. And, what I said to Jeff was, we really need to see about trying to put together a consulting outfit that can compete for that kind of work. If, this is an indication that there is a niche in the consulting market that is not being filled by, the current players that are out there. So this is 2009 when we first started, talking about this in particular. And so, the involvement with TBLI kind of came out of that experience. And, what we were attempting to do when I went on an investor salon tour in 2010 to try to speak to investment people about this opportunity of doing ecosystem restoration work, or what I had called at the time earth repair work. And that by investing in trying to recover portions of the globe that are effectively no longer functional, that this is a way to be able to provide added value. Like, for instance, during the time of the real estate boom, when people would buy, dilapidated properties, they would invest in the refurbishing of a house, and then you would sell the house for many times what it was that you had bought it for. In this instance, you're seeing a very sort of similar principle, similar idea at work, where you're taking land that is no longer functional, you sort of fix it, and then you could, put it back on the market either for an increased value, or you're able to reap the benefits of the services that are provided by these functional landscapes again. This was something that I thought had a very high degree of attraction and great market potential, because
to really see the land as the product,
where the land is the product, not what's produced from the land, right? But the actual land itself,
underlying asset.
Exactly, it's sort of the primary asset from which the derivatives, what's produced from land, are made possible. And so, and this is something that, John Liu, for instance, this is one of the great sort of commonalities that we had in terms of the common interest that we had seen when we met one another, was this idea that land is sort of the primary, most important asset that we have, and that it's a logical fallacy to believe that the derivatives, the things that are actually produced from land, has more value than the land itself. And that is presently, the way that I think most investment people, that this is the way they look at the world, is that you're essentially cannibalizing the body, if you will, sort of harvesting the organs of the body, the terrestrial body, and placing value on the organs and completely disregarding the body. And, if you are removing too many of the vital organs from the body, you eventually kill the body.
So you're an extractor, not an investor or an entrepreneur.
Right. You're an extractor, not an investor. You're basically making money from harvesting organs.
Almost wild harvesting instead of properly farming, or instead of making sure that the body, between brackets, that you're taking it from, has the capacity to regenerate. Right.
Exactly. I mean, and what we really should be encouraging is a type of a husbandry. And husbandry is really about partnership. You form a partnership, something that is mutually beneficial. And really, you're doing this out of a sense of an enlightened self-interest, realizing that if the moment you diminish the functional capability of landscape or an ecosystem or some sort of ecological infrastructure, you diminish yourself, because you are a part of that system. You are a part of that infrastructure. And that, you're literally pulling the rug out from underneath your feet. And so if that understanding can be inculcated into people that have the capital, which enables, the economic activity that dictates the world within which we live.
Just to be clear, the financial capital.
Exactly. So in particular, the financial capital. And that financial capital is being used to enable certain types of activity with regard to our interaction with living capital or natural capital or ecosystem capital. And if you can use financial capital to regenerate those things, or to make them better as opposed to making them worse, then you're able to prolong your ability to be able to have some sort of regenerative, beneficial economic activity that is not predicated on extraction, which eventually you just get to the point where there's nothing left to extract. And at this point in history, we're living on a planet with, again, a limited number of resources that are becoming less and less available and viable by the day. And unless we change the way in which we think about how we invest in things and how we generate economic activity, if we don't change that in relatively short order, there's going to be nothing left to extract. And so if that's the way people make money, how do you make money when the source of your ability to make money is no longer available?
And have you seen, since you started talking with TBLI in 2009, 2010, have you seen a change in let's say the amount or the number of investors that are seeing this, maybe the way they're investing? Has that changed in the last 8 years? And if so, how?
I think some of the language, I think the way people are talking about these kinds of things is changing. However, I think the direction in which investment is being directed, and the degree to which investment is being directed, as far as the financial capital that's made available, it's still not ending up in the places that it needs to end up in order to affect the type of ends I think people in our camp have in mind. And I think a great deal of this has to do with the nature of the investment cycles that most investment people are used to dealing with. There's certain markets, or there's certain ways in which investors are accustomed to being able to realize financial returns. They're just vehicles that they're used to dealing with. And the investment cycles, which are often connected to some sort of intellectual property or proprietary technology, some sort of discrete product that can be financialized, that's not necessarily what we're talking about when we're discussing things like ecosystem restoration or land restoration or rehabilitation or earth repair work. Instead of investment cycles that are along the lines of several months or sometime maybe within a year or a couple of years. I mean, we're really looking at 1 to 2 decades. That we need people to stay engaged.
Yeah, most long-term funds are 7 to 10 years, and you're lucky if you can add 1 or 2 extra, so you're at 12.
Exactly.
But then you're just getting started.
Exactly.
When you're restoring ecosystem.
Right. So you're just getting in the game. As far as what most people would think of as quote unquote long-term investment, as you said, 7 to 10 years. When we look at the Common Land Foundation, which we had been discussing earlier, and the work of Willem Verwerda, Willem's been talking about, and whenever he has contact with potential investors or supporters, he says, I need you to stay engaged in this process for at least 20 years, because ultimately that's the kind of timescale that you need capital, or the people that hold or have access to the types of financial capital that enables the work. That's what we need. Those are the lengths of time, or the time windows that we need people to stay engaged. Because that's really when you begin to see the recovery and the benefits that are produced from engaging in this kind of work. That's when you really start to see the benefits manifest. The problem is that financial people are not known for their patience necessarily.
No, and they're also always asking for track records, which of course, if the work takes, let's say, at least 15 years to really show itself, and this movement of large-scale ecosystem restoration isn't that old, and there are not so many examples where you can show that, because a lot of projects started maybe 5 years ago, or if we're lucky 8. So we still need to wait quite a bit before we can show you. But let's see, that there's almost a portfolio of examples, but most of them are still very underdeveloped yet, but they're on the way. You cannot see too much.
No, exactly. And I think, the funny thing is in some cases, it's not even necessarily a matter of even the work that is being called for taking 20 years necessarily. I mean, if you look at One of the better large scale examples, which would of course be the Los Plateau Watershed Rehabilitation Project that John Liu has done a lot of media work on. That's a project that had seen great results, amazing returns within a decade. But I think the key to the success of that project was, number one, having a sizable amount of capital be made available at the beginning of the project. And of course, there were certain aspects of the governance and the management of the area that was being worked on that facilitated its ability to produce the results that we saw. But if you break down the amount of investment per unit area, in the Los Plateau projects, it's embarrassingly small. So, I mean, if you look at that project it covered roughly 3.5 million hectares. The amount of money that was put up by the World Bank Rural Development Agency was $500 million, was $500 million over the course of 10 years. If you break down $500 million over 3.5 million hectares, that's roughly $143 per hectare over 10 years. So that means per year it's roughly $14.30 a hectare, right, for 10 years. And for that money, they were able to take 2.5 million people out of poverty in the 4 poorest regions of China. They were able to cut the rate of poverty from about 59% to 27%. And they tripled the incomes of the farmers in that area. And in the process of doing that, they were able to remedy all of the problems they had with famine, drought, flood, dust storms, the silting of the Yellow River and a number of the other kind of waterways in the region. I mean, they brought back this entire the ecological health of this entire region and revitalized the economy at the same time. So what that tells you is that they were able to identify kind of the acupressure points, which revived that entire terrestrial body. Not only in terms of the ecosystem health, the ecosystem function, but also the economic health and the economic function and all the other things that are connected to that. So these things are not operating in a mutually exclusive manner. They're very much linked. They're very much connected, but you have to identify the right pressure points so you get that optimization or that maximizing of benefit by investing in the right place.
And if that one has been such a success and it's been financed partly by the World Bank, why haven't we seen more? Because it's been a few years.
No, that's a good question. I mean, I think part of it is ignorance. And I think there are many people outside of a relatively small group of folks that operating in certain areas of activity that even know that a project like this even exists. I know when I talk to people, and especially anybody that's involved in finance or investment, they don't know anything about this project.
And the question should be, how can I invest in that? How can I put money to work? Because this was a World Bank grant, right? It wasn't an investment.
Absolutely. I mean, the funny thing is, if you take that project and you use the same figures in terms of the amount of investment per unit area, and you were to scale that up to the amount of land that is characterized as being either degraded, desertifying, or desertified, which is approximately 2 billion hectares globally. And that number is growing, according to the UNCCD, it's growing at a rate of about 10 to 12 million hectares per year. If you take that same figure, the investment numbers from the Los Plateau, and you were to apply it to that area of degraded land, theoretically, you could recover all of that land for a fraction of the annual defense budget for the United States.
Which would probably also save a lot on the defense budget in the long
run. Right, which would ultimately save a lot on the defense budget, which admittedly, the U.S. Department of Defense
is quite well advanced in thinking on this part.
Yeah, I mean, even the U.S. Department of Defense and other military and intelligence agencies have admitted that environmental issues are among the most important, if not the most important, national security issues to be faced at present. So it's not like this isn't on the radar of the folks who see this as being, a type of enlightened self-interest, and understanding that this is going to impact not only the people that are would be characterized as being sort of tree huggers or environmentally minded, but just sort of the nuts and bolts, basic security minded people see this as being of prime critical importance and worthy of attention.
And they should.
Yeah.
So let's recap. I'm an impact investor. I'm listening to this. I don't have $500 million in my back pocket, but I do have money to invest. And I'm in the mindset of looking long term. I'm not scared anymore for the 20 years. And also the 20 years doesn't mean, just to clarify, that your investment is locked up for 20 years. I mean, many of these ecosystem restoration projects have multiple different types of investments, different types of returns, different types of cycles, etc. But it takes about 20 years to restore an ecosystem normally. So I'm used to that thinking. Where do I start, and what do I set as goals as an investor that wants to put his or her own personal wealth to work?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that there are a number of publications that in recent years that I think do a pretty good job of identifying ways in which investment dollars can be mobilized or can be placed to be able to put investors in a position to realize a healthy return while producing a lot of good. I mean, one of the more valuable publications or references was actually put out by the United Nations Environment Program. The UNEP put together something called Dead Planet, Living Planet, Biodiversity and Ecosystem Restoration for Sustainable Development, a rapid response assessment. And what they did was they tried to assess, number one, the financial impact that paying attention to the loss of ecosystem services, the impact that it has on the economy. So for one,
is that where the famous number of 40 billion comes from? No, what was it? 40 trillion.
Well, yeah. So basically, just reading a portion of the introduction of that document says biodiversity and ecosystems deliver crucial services to humankind, from food security to keeping our waters clean, buffering against extreme weather, providing medicines to recreation, and adding to the foundation of human culture. Together, these services have been estimated to be worth over 21 to 72 trillion US dollars every year, comparable to the world gross national income of 58 trillion US dollars in 2008. So in attempting to provide some sort of valuation of what is lost when we don't pay attention to these issues, the providing this estimate was, obviously obviously supposed to be a way of attracting people's attention, or drawing their attention to this issue, and then, using a financial incentive to get investors to put more money into this particular area of activity of, recovering, ecological systems, recovering, degraded landscapes, restoring areas that have become heavily degraded. The economics of, it was the Teague report that had been published in, I guess it was 2009. A great deal of what was contained in those documents, that's what ended up in this publication, this UNEP publication. So they did a lot of, I think, really great work in trying to estimate the value of, for example, farmland, that is managed in a way that would be considered acceptable, for the sale of organic produce as opposed to conventional. The fact that you're able to get a much higher market price, for instance, the ecological benefits of adopting agroecology. So there's that report that had come out from Olivier de Schutter the UN special rapporteur on the right to food. You know, all of the benefits I think have been very well documented. So I think those are not in question. I think the problem is we haven't done a very good job of communicating that to people who are not familiar with these things. So I think there's a certain kind of cognitive mapping that finance people and investment people are familiar with, and they're accustomed to looking at the world via that mapping,
that lens, yeah,
right, that through that lens, and they're not quite able to get their head around what's being discussed here. So I don't think it's necessarily a matter of, the information isn't available. The information is available. It's just that these are people that are not accustomed to looking in the places in which this information is available. And so how do we bridge the gap?
Yeah.
And, how do we do a better job of marketing and of communicating this opportunity to people who may very well be interested in it if they knew that it was available, and if they understood the mechanisms by which they can put their money in and then eventually be able to experience, see the returns come back. And again, very healthy long-term returns.
And do you see a lot of those mechanisms? Because that would be probably the next question of an investor who has read all of these documents, sees, of course, in his personal or her personal surrounding the effects of non-sustainable land management. And then the question, okay, what's next? What's my call to action? How can I get busy and start investing? And then you need vehicles, or you buy a lot of land yourself and start developing that as sustainably as possible. But you probably usually run out of funds pretty quickly. How can you sort of indirectly put money to work in the sector?
Well, again, I think the problem, and again, as we were discussing before we started recording, was I think the investor's mindset, number one, has to change from one that is essentially a gambler's mindset or a speculator's mindset,
which is not even an investor. We called it before like it's a gambler instead of an investor. Can you distinguish the two?
Right. Yeah. So I think an investor is someone who I think is in reality and in actuality they are looking to produce more benefit than simply being able to to make a lot of money, by finding a way to make the quick buck. They're actually looking for opportunities that produce more benefit than simply making fast money. I mean, if it's just a matter of making fast money, there's not. I mean, really, this drive to make fast money, it doesn't distinguish investment people from thieves. Thieves can make fast money by picking people's pockets. Drug dealers can make fast money by selling a narcotic to an addict. Bank robbers can make fast money by sticking up a bank.
But nobody would call them investors. Yeah.
Right, but that's not what investment is. That's hustling. That's what that is. I think what investors do is they're able to take capital, and they understand that there are many more types of capital other than that found in finance. So we had talked before about the work of some colleagues of mine, Ethan Rowland and Gregory Landauer, they've written this book on regenerative enterprise. And in the course of writing the book and presenting the ideas of the book, they talk about there being 8 forms of capital. Among them, there's intellectual capital, there's cultural capital, there's financial capital, natural capital, living capital, spiritual capital, there's social capital. Again, there's all of these other forms of capital, which forms the basis of our lives. And ultimately, I think what an investor is trying to do is take whatever capital they have in place or they have access to, and they are looking to produce as much benefit as possible, not only for themselves, right, but they're able to create this extended concatenation, if you will, of beneficial outcomes from identifying ways in which to employ finance, for instance, and then they're able to create this long-term extended benefit for this, for circles outside of their immediate sphere of influence or operation. They're able to see how they can contribute to the creation of sort of some sort of great civilizational outcome through the employment of their capital. And I think enabling people to be able to live a dignified existence. I mean, that's what I see an investor as being, as someone who produces that outcome. They're able to create more benefit than harm through their employment of their management of capital. And that's for me, that's what an investor is someone who does that. Anything aside from that, that's just solely interested in making a lot of money through, admittedly employing some sort of skill. And I think a great deal of it is luck, and being able to flip, $1 and make it into 5 somehow. I mean, that's artifice. You can extract money, or you can extract, some sort of, selfish benefit out of a broken system. And essentially that's what we see happening is, people are very good at doing that. But ultimately, you're going to have to face not addressing some of those critical items that we now see confronting us in the world today. And that, this idea that I'm safe if you're safe, right? I'm taken care of if you're taken care of. I'm in danger if you're in danger. Unless that sensibility is adopted by people that are in the realm of investment, in the world of investment, unless that's a reality for people, then I think we're in for a very difficult time, for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, definitely. And to switch gears a bit, we've mentioned them before, but I don't think we've put enough attention to the camps. So what are the ecosystem restoration camps? It's relatively new. There's one getting up in Spain, but can you explain a bit more on that?
Well, I think the ecosystem restoration camps, interestingly enough, I believe is a product of an attempt to try to bring what we were just discussing to the fore. This idea of being able to take land that's degraded, land that isn't in particularly good shape, and employing certain strategies and techniques that are replicable. You're showing how you can use these ideas and these approaches to bring back damaged landscape, and then training people in how to use them, and then going somewhere else in the world where you have a very similar condition, and you repeat what you were able to do at the camp. And so the first example that we have, the first camp is on a farm of a family that was interested in participating in the project. It's a farm that's in southern Spain, on the Altiplano, and a lot of southern Spain's in pretty bad shape in terms of land degradation. And I mean, a lot of southern Spain's looking like North Africa. And because there was, it was seen that there's a need for this kind of work to be done. These were folks that were willing to house, to give us a base from which to work, to be able to demonstrate the idea, have it be documented, give people a place to be able to come and participate in this, and then eventually be able to deploy this in various regions of the globe that are in need of the same work. And I think by means of this, we're able to show not only how we can produce a great outcome from bringing back landscape and restoring its ecological function, but also seeing how economically this is something that can produce a great deal of benefit, not only in terms of the productive capabilities of landscape, but how it can employ a huge number of people potentially, and give them meaningful work to do, and provide a really robust economic engine that can be transferred to anywhere and everywhere.
And the first one is up in Spain, I think, since a few months. I mean, it's very new. I saw a lot of things on Twitter. Where the next planned, or that depends on the people that come and then take it back home, basically, or taking to the landscapes that they are working or want to do working?
Yeah, so if you look at one of the main participants, or one of the main supporters of the project is Common Land Foundation, and so they're currently behind this effort to an extent, but they also have sort of similar work that's operating in a very similar vein in South Africa, in Western Australia, and also another area in southern Spain. And so those efforts are actually specifically oriented towards agricultural businesses, that are looking to use more regenerative methods to do what they've been doing. But obviously, the regenerative methods are meant to be able to produce more benefit because they're using techniques and strategies that are much more amenable to being on landscape for an extended period of time. It's able to produce a more multifaceted benefit, not only in terms of economically speaking for the folks that are on land, but also you're able to see how, in terms of the ecosystem function, the ecological functioning of that landscape, it's producing benefit as well. So the camps right now, the first one is in Spain. Although we have talked about the possibility of extending this, for instance, I have a colleague in Tasmania who I had suggested using his place as a site to be able to establish a camp, because a great deal of what it is that we want to get set up in Spain, he already has going at his site. It's a colleague named Paul Ringo Keane, and he has a business called Tiger Hill Permaculture in Tasmania. And I would invite everybody to look up what he's been doing. But I think there are a number of other potential sites that could also serve as in a similar way as to what we have happening in southern Spain. It's just a matter of getting everybody sort of networked, being able to get the word out to people that are interested in becoming involved, to get the word out to people that may be interested in financially backing what it is that we're doing. Because right now, this is largely financed through the contributions of the donations that are being put in by people that are becoming members of the project. So we're asking for 10 euros a month, about 120 euros a year, to become a formal member of the ecosystem restoration camps. And this is, largely what is financing the present functioning of those camps, the provisioning of those camps.
Extremely, extremely interesting. I want to end with a final question to you. What's next for you? What's next you're traveling a lot through or for permaculture and regenerative agriculture. From now on, basically, let's say until the end of the year, what are you most excited about? What do you want to share? What can you share about what's coming up for you?
Well, again, a lot of my work is centered on, mostly the sort of the dry lands, the arid climate regions of the globe, so the Middle East, North Africa, the Gulf, Southern Europe. And so I have a number of projects. Some of them are design courses, and some of them are setting up similar types of project work that we see happening in Spain. Some of them are consultancies. So I'm continuing to do what I've been doing elsewhere in the region over the past several years. But I think ultimately the goal is always to try getting some variety of large scale long-term restoration work to be established, and again get the proper backing, the proper financial backing and resourcing of those projects, so that we have bigger and better examples to bring to the table. And, success breeds success, which is what I like to always say. And I think it's just a matter of having, bigger and better, well-documented examples of the work to show to people so that, they have the assurance that, fine, if they're being asked to get behind this work, that, it's something that is going to net them a return. They actually see that this is turning into something that's worth getting behind. And, and a lot of what I'm doing is just simply trying to contribute whatever I can to that end, is to bring more attention to what it is that, we're hoping to bring to the mainstream, if you will. Mainstream consciousness is understanding that this is a possibility for us, that we can bring back these degraded areas of the globe, and ultimately that is what is going to provide the type of stability and security I think many of us are concerned about. We're concerned about establishing.
To bring back hope, if I can summarize it.
Yeah, I mean, really, that's ultimately, I think, the goal is that, it is possible for all of us to live in a world where we can live a dignified existence. And it doesn't have, we don't have to be in a place to where, you have a very small number of people that are living high on the hog, if you will, and everybody else is living this decrepit, dystopian, depressing life, at the expense of, this small number of people that are just, taking more than they really need. And it doesn't have to be that way. And I think if you really have a concern, not only for people, but just, if you have a concern for the, the world that you live in, and you want to think about more than simply yourself, this is something that I believe is a very real possibility in terms of providing that potential to create that world to where everybody has enough, they have more than enough, and we all can live a good life.
With that, I would like to thank you and end this interview. I'm sure I will be checking in regularly and share the process of your amazing work. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Koen.
You just listened to an interview with Rhamis Kent, permaculture expert and consultant. We've discussed many things in this interview, from what's the difference between an investor and a gambler, the short-time mindset of most investors, and his involvement in the ecosystem restoration camps, who just started in Spain this year. Thank you for making the time to listen to this podcast and making it all the way till the end. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you found the Investing in Regenerative Agriculture and Food podcast valuable, there are a few simple ways you can use to support it. Number 1, rate and review the podcast on your podcast app. That's the best way for other listeners to find the podcast, and it only takes a few seconds. Number 2, share this podcast on social media or email it to your friends and colleagues. Number 3, if this podcast has been of value to you, and if you have the means, please join my Patreon community to help grow this platform and allow me to take it further. You can find all the details on patreon.com/regenerative agriculture or in the description below. Thank you so much, and see you at the next podcast. Dear friends of the podcast, I'm super excited to share with you the online video course Investing in Regenerative Agriculture and Food. How to put money to work in regenerating soils at scale and growing a lot of tasty food while doing it. Why are we doing this course? After 100 interviews and more than 100 hours of audio asking the question how to put money to work in regenerating soils, and have been following the space since 2011 and recording these podcasts since 2016, we thought it was time to share our lessons learned. What have we seen in the space over the last years? How have we built our decision-making framework? What to focus on with the podcast? How have we picked interviewees? What questions should you ask? What is happening in the space? What should you read? What should you listen? What should you watch? How to approach this space? For whom is this course? You, the soil builders and investors in this space. The soil builders, people working in this space, entrepreneurial farmers, fund managers, vehicle builders, crowd investing, platform builders, agtech companies, farm-to-gut food companies, permaculture, keyline designers, holistic management consultants, etc., etc. People that are building soil at scale. and the investors who are putting their own money to work through their family office or as private individuals, or people who are putting other people's money to work through foundations, institutional capital, banks, insurance companies, etc. Is this course free? No, this is pay what you think it's worth. Meaning I have no way of knowing what this course will be worth to you. And I'm very aware that among the listeners of this podcast, we have people with very different means. So I'm inviting you, if this course is creating value to you, and if you have the means, to consider paying what you think it's worth. Thank you. So what is this course? It's currently a series of 17 videos, mostly ranging from 10 to 15 minutes, plus PDF slides, so you don't have to ride along. We're gonna look into why invest in regenerative agriculture and why extractive agriculture is so risky, how to invest, what kind of frameworks you could and I think should build, what to invest in, what kind of co-investors you could find, or what kind of investors you could find if you're a soy builder. Every lesson will have a digging deeper part where I will share what kind of reports, what kind of interviews, what kind of videos you can look into if you want to dig deeper. We're going to look at nutrient density, landscape design, and a lot more. So what is it not? It's not a list of investable deals. Unfortunately, that doesn't exist in this world. We're really at the beginning of the regenerative agriculture and food revolution. It's also not investment advice. Before making any investment, please find professional investment advice. So get ready, get a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, or whatever you're drinking. Click on the link below, sign up, and I'm really looking forward to your feedback.